Welcome to Chapter 2, Creating the Constitution. The Constitution is going to be the focal point for this chapter as well as the two following ones for the remainder of Quarter 1. You should have taken a look at the unit project and what is going to be expected of you at this point. And please understand that your understanding of the Constitution is going to be essential for completing that project. Section 1 deals with the Constitutional Convention. The men who had framed the first government of the United States, the Articles of Confederation, knew that it was a complete disaster. And Shays' Rebellion, remember, was the eye-opener. So the framers of our government, including George Washington and James Madison and Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, realized that they needed to form a new government. So representatives from each of the newly formed 13 states convened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at Independence Hall from May to September of 1787 in order to draft a new constitution. Essentially what this was, if you go by the strict definition, this was a rebellion, this was a revolution. But it was a revolution through ideas and discussion and paper, not through guns and bloodshed. They were overthrowing the Articles of Confederation and establishing a brand new government. George Washington was chosen to be the leader and to preside over the convention. In order for these men to use their time efficiently, they established certain rules. For example, no talking, no passing notes, no papers leaving the building, windows and curtains shut, and they met 6 days a week. The reason why they did not want papers or information leaving the building was because they were afraid if the public knew what they were doing behind those closed doors, that the people would revolt and the people would automatically view this new constitution with a stigma and a negative view and not vote to ratify it at all. Even though they knew that what they were doing was the right thing, they knew that the public would not view it that way. They would view it as a small group of men attempting to take power away from the people. When the men met, they agreed on certain things. They agreed that they wanted to prevent tyranny, that they needed a stronger national government, that they wanted to incorporate separation of powers, and that they wanted to divide the government power between the federal and state governments. What they disagreed about was how much power the federal government should have and how many representatives each state should have in the national government. I'm just going to mention here quickly that the word national and federal mean the same thing. And sometimes you may see the word central as well. That is also the same idea. At the convention, two sides eventually arose. The first side followed the Virginia plan, and this was a plan that favored the states that had a large amount of people. This was proposed by James Madison. He proposed that the government has 3 branches. Remember, that's what they agreed on. And he suggested that the legislature, the group of people that were going to make the laws, should be bicameral. Bicameral means 2 houses. And he wanted the number of representatives in that legislature to be based on population. So states with bigger populations would have more representatives in the legislature. Of course, this is going to outrage the smaller states, such as New Jersey. New Jersey agreed that 3 branches was needed, but it wanted a 1-house legislature, and it wanted representation to be equal for every state. Population size does not matter. Every state gets the same amount of power in their votes. A compromise was proposed by a man named William Sherman. He was from Connecticut, and this man is forgotten in history, but he truly saved the day because men from both sides were proposing that they were going to walk out and form their own countries. It was easy for him to establish the 3 branches. Remember, that was Montesquieu's idea, was separation of powers. And he said that in order to appease both sides, they needed to have a bicameral legislature, 2 houses. The first house would be the Senate with equal representation. This would make the followers of the New Jersey Plan happy. And in the House of Representatives, representation would be based on population. This would appease the people who followed the Virginia Plan. And one other side now, representation based on population Another term for that is proportional representation, because representation is proportional to population size. The men generally agree about this. And if this is what it looks like mapped out. These are the three branches. We have the legislative branch, the group that makes the laws, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch has the Congress, and it is bicameral with the two houses, the one with proportional representation and the Senate with equal representation. The executive branch would be the president and the vice president and his cabinet and agencies, and the judicial branch would be the 9 Supreme Court justices. And this is our legislature. This is our Capitol building. This is where the laws are made for the country. And the two houses, again, the Senate and the House with proportional representation. Pennsylvania has 2 senators, just like every other state, which would make 100 total. Your 2 senators are Robert Casey Jr. and Pat Toomey. The House for Pennsylvania, we have 19 representatives. And the one for the Hazleton district is former Mayor Lou Barletta. You could see how the different states have different representatives. Texas has 32 representatives because Texas has a fairly large population. California has a lot of representatives, 53, because they have a very large population. Pennsylvania 19, New York 29, and you can see that smaller states like Rhode Island have 2 representatives. And states out here that may look big geographically, there's not many people living there. So the number of representatives that they have is 1, because even though it's a large state in surface area, it's not very large in population size. Now, this is the number of House members Pennsylvania has, 19. If we add the 2 senators that we have in addition, that gives us the number 21. This comes into play in electing the President of the United States. Senators and House members are elected directly by the people. Whoever gets the most votes wins. The president is elected through something we call the Electoral College. In Pennsylvania, we have 21 electoral votes. That's the 19 House members that we have plus the 2 senators that we have. California has 53 House members plus the 2 senators is 55. So the number of electoral votes that each state has is equal to the number of total representatives they have in both houses of Congress. When a president is campaigning for re-election or a candidate is campaigning for the presidency, he will go to the states and campaign in those that have the largest number of electoral votes. For example, if incumbent President Barack Obama campaigns in Pennsylvania and wins the majority of the popular vote of all the people in Pennsylvania, he gets 21 electoral votes. If he campaigns in Florida and wins the majority of the popular vote in Florida, he gets 27 more electoral votes, and so on and so forth. If he had gone to California and won, he would get 55 more votes. If Republican candidate Mitt Romney campaigned and won in Texas, he would get 34 votes. And usually the slogan is 270 to win. Whoever reaches and surpasses 270 electoral votes first is the winner of the presidency. Now, one problem came up in counting populations with the House of Representatives. The southern states wanted to count their slaves in their populations, and then the North basically said, no way, you don't treat them like human beings, you don't give them the rights of citizens, you cannot count them in your population. They were doing this because it would give them more votes in the House of Representatives, which basically is more power. If a bill was proposed that could possibly legalize slavery in the United States, and the southern states had the most votes, then they would win and that bill would pass and slavery could potentially be made legal. The North was outraged. They said absolutely not. So they came to a compromise. Basically, 3 out of every 5 slaves would be counted in the population. In plain terms, if there were 5 slaves, they would pretend like 2 of them didn't exist, and they would only count 3 of them in the population. At this point in time, the men at the convention were so exhausted and just wanted to go home. They said, okay, we'll agree to that. And they signed the Constitution. Ironically, one man was not there. This man was in France. Thomas Jefferson was not at the Constitutional Convention. But they did keep him updated, and they sent him information overseas. And he responded in this primary source letter. I like the organization of the government into legislative, judiciary, and executive branches. I like the power given the Congress to levy taxes. And I approve of the greater house being chosen by the people directly. I will now tell you what I do not like. First, there is no Bill of Rights, providing clearly for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, protection against standing armies, and trials by jury in all matters that may be tried by the laws of the land. Let me add that a Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth. I want you to think about this quote when we get into the second section of this chapter, because he is going to be proven to be 100% correct in his judgment. Constitution was officially signed by 39 of the delegates at the Constitutional Convention on September 17th, 1787. And we still call that date, September 17th, Constitution Day. And here's just a brief review so that you could see the difference between the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. The Articles was a loose alliance of independent states. The Constitution created a national government that represented all citizens. The Articles had a one-house legislature. The Constitution has a two-house or bicameral legislature. The Articles had no executive or judiciary branches. Under the Constitution, there are 3. Under the Articles, only the states could tax. Under the Constitution, the national government and the states can tax. That's why we pay federal and state taxes today. Under the Articles, the states could make their own money. Now only the national government can make money. And under the Articles, most power was held by the states. Today, the national and state governments share that power. This concludes the Section 1 presentation. I know that it was very long, but this is all information that will be relevant to your completing the assignments and the projects for this unit.